All right, let's just jump right into this. Because this is a story that honestly feels like it was ripped straight from a Hollywood movie script, not a real world headline. We are talking about a top secret military raid under the cover of darkness to capture the sitting president of another country. This is the anatomy of Operation Absolute Resolve.
And that one sentence, wow, it just paints a picture, doesn't it? In the absolute dead of night on a Saturday, the United States government kicked off one of the most daring, most audacious special operations in recent memory. The target, the president of Venezuela, Nicolas Maduro.
And just look at the speed of this thing. I mean, it's incredible. The final go is given from Florida at 11 p.m., and just over 4 hours later, the mission is done. The target is secured, and the team is already on its way back to a U.S. Navy ship. Think about everything that had to happen in that tiny window, from cyber warfare to a full-on aerial assault. It's just mind-bogglingly fast and precise.
So, who do you send to pull off a mission this risky? Well, you send the absolute best of the best. The boots on the ground were led by the U.S. Army's most secretive unit, a group you've probably heard of, Delta Force. And the pilots? They were from the legendary 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment, better known as the Night Stalkers. These guys are literal masters of flying in the dark, of going where no one else can.
Okay, so let's really get into the nuts and bolts here. How exactly did they pull off a raid this unprecedented? Because this wasn't just a simple smash and grab. This was a complex, perfectly timed assault across multiple domains. What's so fascinating here are all of the different layers. This thing started months before the actual raid. The CIA began what they call shaping operations, which is basically spy talk for setting the stage. They tracked Maduro's every move, his daily routine, what the intel world calls his pattern of life. Then, on the night, bam, U.S. Cyber Command hits the lights, plunging the entire capital city into darkness. A fleet of 150 aircraft created a massive diversion, while 11 helicopters flew in under the radar to drop off the assault team. And this one detail, this tells you everything you need to know about how well it all worked. The operation achieved complete, total surprise. According to sources close to the operation, the assault team breached Maduro's residence to find him asleep. He was taken right from his bed, zip-tied, and walked to a helicopter before his guards even knew what was happening. Okay, so they did it. But now for the big question, the one everyone was asking. Why? Why would the U.S. government authorize something so dramatic, so bold? As you can imagine, the fallout was instant, and the White House had its story ready to go. In his address to the nation, President Trump didn't frame this as an act of war. Instead, he framed it as a response to an economic attack. The official justification was all about the seizure of American-owned oil assets, which he called, and I'm quoting here, one of the largest thefts of American property in the history of our country. So here's the thing. You really have to look at the two sides of this coin to get the full picture. On one side, you've got the official U.S. rationale. They pointed to existing criminal indictments against Maduro for drug trafficking, plus the economic argument we just heard. But you just can't ignore the massive geopolitical context hanging over all of this. Venezuela is sitting on top of the largest proven oil reserves in the entire world, more than Saudi Arabia. And that fact is always in the background of U.S. policy in that part of the world.
All right, politics and geopolitics aside for a minute, let's talk about the money. Because mobilizing this kind of military firepower, well, it doesn't come cheap, not even close.
According to an analysis from the Costs of War Project, American taxpayers shelled out at least, get this, $4.7 billion for military operations in the region just between August 2025 and March 2026. That includes the buildup, the raid itself, the whole shebang. And if you look at this chart, you can see exactly where all that cash went. Just look at that top line item, naval deployment, over $3.8 billion. That's just for the ships, the aircraft carriers, destroyers, all the hardware that form the backbone of this force. Then you've got another $616 million for the aircraft. And to really put that in perspective, check out the cost to fly some of these planes for just 1 hour. A single B-1B bomber, which they used in this operation, costs almost $90,000 an hour to keep in the air. That is more than many people in America make in an entire year, spent in just 60 minutes. But here's the crucial part. That huge $4.7 billion number, that's just the tip of the iceberg.
The cost of war project is very clear that this is a conservative estimate. It doesn't include things like CIA operations or the interest on the debt used to pay for the mission, or maybe most importantly, the lifelong cost of care for the veterans involved. So the real price tag? It's going to be a lot higher.
An operation this expensive, this audacious, you know it's going to raise some really profound questions about whether it was legal. And sure enough, the raid immediately set off a firestorm of debate among international law experts. So, to really get into this debate, we have to understand this one huge, fundamental idea: state sovereignty. It's the bedrock of modern international law, this principle that every country has control over its own territory and other nations can't just interfere. And that brings us to the central legal question of this whole affair. Does one country have the right to send its military into another country to grab its leader?
And here's where you see the two sides clash. The US government argued that this was just law enforcement, like serving a warrant on a criminal. But on the other side, you have a whole chorus of legal experts saying no way. They argue that a military operation with 150 aircraft is a clear use of force and a major violation of Venezuela's sovereignty. It also tramples on the idea of head of state immunity and didn't have the required UN Security Council sign-off. The real fear is that this sets a dangerous new precedent, basically normalizing the idea that powerful countries can just go and grab the leaders of countries they don't like.
So, Maduro's captured. He's flown to the US to stand trial. But what happens back in Venezuela? You can't just remove a nation's leader and expect things to stay calm. You create a massive power vacuum, and that can be incredibly dangerous. So, in the immediate chaos, the vice president, Delcy Rodriguez, was sworn in as the acting president. But this was anything but a smooth, stable transition of power. The country's entire government was just thrown into total disarray. And on the streets, the reaction was, well, it was all over the place. Local news outlets described a scene of shock and confusion. Some people were actually celebrating, hoping this would finally mean some kind of economic relief. But others, especially the pro-Maduro groups, saw it for what they believed it was, an act of American imperialism, and they vowed to resist. In the end, Operation Absolute Resolve set a powerful and deeply controversial new precedent. It proved that the world's greatest military power could and would reach into a sovereign nation and take its leader. And that leaves us with this final, really unsettling question for the future of our world. When something like this is possible, who actually gets to write the rules?